Welcome to Shop Talk Live, episode number 249. I say it every time, but we've got a fun show for you. This past week, Mr. Mike Pekovich was teaching at Bob Van Dyke's school, the Connecticut Valley School of Woodworking. So I wandered up there one evening with a camera and a couple of microphones, and we sat out in the open air on the loading dock / patio and recorded this here podcast. It's got a little bit of a parking lot vibe to it, but it's Bob Van Dyke and Mike Pekovich talking about woodworking. It's worth getting through, trust me. Real quick, I want to let everyone know that issue 292 just went to the printers, and it should be hitting mailboxes everywhere starting September 29th, but only if you are a Fine Woodworking subscriber or a finewoodworking.com unlimited member. If you're not a subscriber or an unlimited member, keep in mind that this free podcast is not free to make. Ads help pay for this podcast, but what really pays for this podcast is subscribers and unlimited members. And thank you to each and every one of you. And if you've been on the fence, jump off that fence. Come on, water's fine. All right, on with the show. So I snuck up here after class, and I feel a little guilty because both of you have to be pretty tired.
Well, I was the only one who's working.
I wasn't. I was screwing around all day, doing errands and stuff.
Shopping for couches.
No, that was the other day.
Are you really just here making sure Pekovich doesn't, take anything?
I'm just, to control the mayhem. That's all. And to question it and to open the door in the morning.
Okay.
That's it.
But,
I have no other use.
But are you... Question for both of you. Are you just desperately tired at the end of a class? Because I know when I take a class, I am spent at the end of the day. And it makes me question whether I could woodwork full time and have that amount of focus. Not that I screw off in my normal day job and don't focus.
That'd be ridiculous. Don't even go there.
But like woodworking 8 hours straight. That's tough.
Yeah, and if you're taking a class, it's a different kind of woodworking. It's an artificial environment. There's a lot of people around. There's a lot of noise. You're worried about, am I going fast enough? Is my stuff as good as the person next to me? And then I'm usually asking you to use a tool you're not familiar with, or if you are, I'm asking you to use it in a way you're not familiar with.
In a place that you're not familiar with, and everything is uncomfortable.
A bench that's not your bench.
Yeah.
So it's like going on a 50-mile hike where you have to give every single step you take your full attention.
Yeah.
So I may be tired, but I know I've got it much easier than everybody else in the class.
Okay.
So I can't complain. And I'm responsible for them going through that, so I feel...
Well, but you're the teachers, it seems like you're almost needing to focus more. But you've done it so many more times than a student. But you're waiting. You're trying to keep students from screwing up.
We're trying to stay ahead.
Yes.
I mean, I think of it as I'm trying to stay 7 steps ahead of them, and, trying to set up all sorts of different tasks so that if you're done with one thing, you can go on. Or if there's 3 people in front of you on a machine, you can be doing something else. Yeah. So it's all, to me, it's all multitasking and staying a couple steps ahead of people. But it's funny. It's like we were talking about last night at dinner. I'm not tired. I don't feel tired at the end of the day. When I'm doing this kind of thing. I mean, I might get a little, around 4:30, I start yawning a lot, but that goes away after about 15, 20 minutes, and then I'm fine again.
That's called not being 17.
Be careful.
I picked a low number, so I fall in the range as well.
All right. Yeah, but I don't ever feel like, wow, I hear people go, oh, wow, I'm so tired. And I'm going, really? And I can't say that I'm ever feel B.
Okay.
I mean, yeah, because you just keep going. Maybe it's just adrenaline. you know, but yeah.
We're gonna let that truck pass.
Well, and let's hope that we don't have any of the ambulances that hang out in the back here.
You know, one thing is the choreography of getting all the setups right, figuring out what's chronological, what has to happen first or second, and which things can happen simultaneously. You can go to any station you want, because the last thing you want is 12 people lined up at one machine.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is that you can give a perfect demonstration in front of the class, but the learning doesn't take place until the tool is in your hand and you're at your bench and you're trying it out. And that's my favorite time to teach, because it's like, okay, I see what you're doing. Try this. I know how that is. Hold it this way, work this way. Try clamping it in a vise. Try keeping your hand out of the path of your chisel. You know, the basic things, but also you have this radar and you just look around and you just sense some stress coming from a corner and you go, and that's like, for me, that's when the real kind of teaching moments are, is that one-on-one. So the energy to, you know, keep up with all the setups and manage a 5 or 6 day long class, and then have the energy to give that one-on-one attention. Because I think for me, that's what makes it a real class, a real learning experience.
And that's where you see the room doing something wrong or holding something wrong, and it's like that's where you kind of run over there.
Yeah.
And because it's just like, you know, I mean, it's just like, nah, you know, they didn't get it.
But fact of the matter is, you don't want a class filled with students without any struggle whatsoever, because then they might not need the class. You know, it's like, no.
Sometimes you think, oh, this is too simple. You know, people are going to get bored. And then it's just like, nah.
That never happens. That never happens.
Really?
I mean,
okay.
Yeah. I mean, it's actually, I find in a class where people are like a little bit more advanced, they get it more. They you know, they can absorb more because they have something to draw from. They have their own experience that they can. Yeah.
Okay. So you just go into third gear with it.
Yeah. One thing is sort of putting out fires, or no problem, we can fix that. You know, two, you have someone who's really on their game, and then you can just push it to the next level.
You
where
can show them,
you
like,
see something, it's
out.
like, oh, I did this, and depending on the student, you might say, don't worry about it, that's okay. Or certain students is, let me show you how to fix that. Rip off the entire edge, glue on a whole new strip, and then mill it down. And
This makes me think. Tell your Phil Lowe story. You had where he's mortising.
The mistake.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, Phil. Years ago, we had Phil was doing a Queen Anne tea table class, and here it was like, probably he'd only done a couple classes. I hadn't known him for maybe a year or two, and he was mortising a long mortise, and the depth stop let go on the mortiser, and it blew right through the front of the apron. And I was mortified. I mean, I was like, oh my God. I mean, here's one of the top woodworkers in the country. The least I can do is give him a machine that actually works. And I couldn't believe it. And I'm watching him, and he didn't blink. I mean, he didn't hesitate. It was like, okay, so here's what you do when this happens. And I'm sure what was going through his mind was not, oh, here's a teaching opportunity. It was like, oh, come on. And he just, without blinking, he went over to the table saw, put a dado blade on, and dadoed the whole length of the, ran a groove the whole length of the apron, and then pulled a scrap out of the bin in the table saw and milled that down and fitted in, glued it in, and it was gone. And that taught me like so much just then. It was like, cause I would have like prior to that, I would have just shook my head and said, I'm going home.
Yeah.
You know, that's it. And it's just like, okay, anything can be fixed and don't lose it and just deal with it. And, well, you know, like when I at Fine Woodworking Live, kind of came from that when I did the fixing mistakes demonstration. I mean, and like there were so many people in the audience. I was like, oh my God.
And it wasn't because you sing and dance.
And it wasn't because of that. Nope. It was just like, yeah, okay, maybe he's got a good way of fixing something, you know, and it's all just keeping your eyes open and watching what other people do and go, okay, that's a good way of doing it.
Yeah.
That works. Yeah.
All right. Should we answer some questions?
Sure.
And turn off our cell phone ringers?
Don't do that.
All right. This one is from Bob. I've been watching some of the older podcasts, and in number 35, back in, '02, you discussed story sticks. I was wondering when you make them. Do you make a story stick up from the drawing before you start the project, or do you make them up as you go through it? In other words, the first leg you cut, mark out the story stick, and then cut all of them? Or, and then make a front apron, mark the stick, and then cut the second apron? Or does it all start with a story stick?
For me, I mean, the answer would be all of the above, almost. I mean, I've done story sticks from measuring originals. You know, like we did a clock, burn-up clock years ago and measured the original at the Wadsworth, and we made story sticks right there in the, you know, and really didn't measure anything. So that's one way of doing it. The other way of doing it is, you know, if you have something that you're doing over and over again, then I'll make a story stick and, you know, or a number of story sticks, either from a drawing, or I know that what those dimensions are. And then like in a class, I'll make, you know, a dozen story sticks the same, you know, all the same. But I find what I'm usually doing is if I'm setting, let's say I'm setting the stops on a sled for aprons, and I'm, you know, like it's 16 inches long, and I will set the stop using a scrap out of the rip bin, and that, you know, that will be the one that I'll test. And okay, I have that dialed into 16 inches, and then that will become a story stick when I'm cutting stuff to length, just to make sure that, you know, if I cut one end off square, that there's enough left on the other end, or if I'm planning on getting 3 pieces out of one piece, I'm going 1, 2, 3 with that story stick. Yeah, that fits. Or I have 2 inches to spare, you know? So that's how I usually do it. Yeah.
So there's story stick. It sort of becomes a pattern in itself.
Well, it takes the place of a tape measure.
Right.
You know, I mean, it takes place of a tape measure, because if I'm using, like if I'm roughing something out, and we do the same thing when we're roughing out boards, you know, out of a 10-foot piece of cherry. If I need to get like, 30-inch pieces, we have a scrap that is just chopped and labeled 30 inches. And that's what we're putting on the rough board and marking it with that, you know, to chop it. And it's usually a rough length, but it's so much quicker and easier than using a tape measure or something. It's the whole, you know, the T-shirts go measure twice, cut once. Yeah, I go the opposite. You know, measure once, make a story stick, and then cut 1,000 times.
Yeah.
You know, think once, cut 1,000 times. So.
Yeah, a lot of times it's quantifying after the fact. It's sort of recording the project. I'll do, you know, story sticks where I'll cut out a case side out of 1/4-inch MDF, which is the exact dimension of the case side, and I will lay out all the joinery on that piece. And that's great for future reference. It's good for setting up machines for classes usually, and it just sort of quantifies the whole thing and makes it easy. On the front end, the story stick, a lot of times I'll be working from full-size mock-ups, drawings or assemblies somehow. And from there, I'll start to take my real dimensions. But rather than going right from sort of this rough full-size mock-up to finished lumber, I'll either have stunt pieces, maybe a leg made out of pine instead of walnut, and mark everything out on that. Or I'll then start to develop something akin to a full-size plan, not, exactly, but where I can gather dimensions in real time and really decide, is that fat marker, is that 2 1/16 or is it 2 1/4, and then mark it from there. So I think in the creation phase, it helps me quantify real dimensions and then build off of that.
I recently wound up with a offcut of plywood that was 5 feet long, 2.5 inches wide, and
$45 for that right now.
yeah, I sold it. And but as I was going through my project, I kept just picking up that cut and holding it up against the crosscut sled, stop, and just running a curve through it.
Yeah.
And with the idea that later on, if I needed to reset the stop, and I did, and what I wound up doing, and this I thought was pretty clever, I took an 1/8 inch setup block, and I put that in the kerf of my fence, or of my miter sled, and then I was able to take that kerf in the piece of scrap plywood and put that on the miter fence and set the setup block right off that.
Exactly.
And it was dead nuts on.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. That's cool.
I've never done like a full-size drawing for anything, or
I find I don't do it as much as I should, but that's another thing I learned from Phil and Will Neptune, is that, Phil would come down, he would do a class here, and he would pull up and he'd come in and go, okay, so what are we doing? And it kind of worried me the first couple of times. I was like, oh my God. And then, I would I'd have a piece of plywood and, or MDF to make a drawing board and the paper, and he would draw the thing full size, and then, okay, now let's make it. And that solves so many questions and problems, by drawing it first, and you see the stuff that where you would have gotten in trouble. And it just, so it really, I think, I wish I did it more, because there's been a couple times when I didn't do it, or I only went halfway and it got me in trouble,
We should mention, I'll post a link, that there's a contingent of people who have acquired Phil's collection of full-size drawings. And they are, I think there's a GoFundMe going in order to digitize the full-size, like his entire collection of full-size drawings.
Exactly.
And make it free to the public. Yeah. So I will post a link, because that's
huge.
That's a legacy. That's, decades from now, people still be referencing those.
I would watch him do a drawing. And he would literally, at the beginning of a class, it would take him, 45 minutes, and the whole thing is drawn: front view, side view, plan view, cut list, and signed Philip C. Lowe and the date. And
that's awesome.
It was huge.
Love it. All right, so this next question is from Luca. And let's see. I listened to the podcast with Mike Michelli, done on this loading dock.
Yeah.
Is this a loading dock? Yeah, kind of.
No, it's a patio. It's a terrace. We call it the I refer to it as the veranda. Okay.
Okay.
Yes.
And he mentioned that warming up varnish before applying it would be a way to work around the problem of having a cold shop environment in the wintertime. I don't think he meant that's a way to work around a cold shop. I think he meant bring the finish up to temperature and do it in a appropriately.
And bring the piece of furniture up to temperature.
And bring the surroundings up to temperature.
Yeah.
Because he said if you're in a warm room with cold finish, it's not gonna.
And cold furniture, right?
Yeah.
Yes, you're bringing everything up. Okay.
But I don't know if that's a hack. But this got me thinking: could I probably cool down white or yellow glue to extend the open time during summer when it's hot in the shop? What are your thoughts, Luca? Brave Luca.
Step away from the glue bottle.
I love the thinking.
Yes,
I mean,
that's
this is
woodworker
a problem
logic.
solver.
Yes, but okay, so
It makes sense, and it was one of the I'm just in the middle of finishing up a glue article right now. Can you think of anything more mundane than writing about glue? I'm sorry.
But
yeah.
reading about glue.
Reading about glue is even worse, yeah. So yeah, when that article comes out, only read it if you're having trouble sleeping.
No, but woodworkers love that stuff,
Yeah,
man.
I know.
below a certain temperature, certain glues like PVAs, bad things will happen.
Yeah.
Like below 50 degrees PVA, it will dry with sort of a chalky glue line, and if it does that,
You're
forget
screwed.
it. It's not holding up. Yeah. So epoxies, I think, are one of the glues that do work below certain temperatures, but then of course their dry time is contingent on the temperature as well.
Well, and that'll be specifically covered on the bottle. I think
Well, the beauty of with epoxies is you can control glue, dry time, and with the mix and different hardeners. But I talked to two different experts about this question because when I read it, it was like, no, it doesn't. That's not how yellow glue dries.
Okay.
So it's not affected by temperature, other than what Mike just said. If you're too cold, it won't work. It'll just
break down.
Yeah. But slowing it down or speeding it up by heating. I talked to Daryl Keel and a Jeffrey Pitcher from Spectrum Adhesives, and they both said that no, it wouldn't make it would make such a small difference. Heating it up a little bit might speed up the cure a hair, but not enough to make it a difference. We're talking about really slightly heating it and slightly cooling it.
You put an electric blanket over bent lam glue ups.
Unibond 800, a urea formaldehyde glue, is definitely affected by the temperature. Where you can have, like a urea formaldehyde glue, like Unibond 800, if you had, let's say, below 70 degrees, you could get into real trouble.
Yeah.
I mean, we had a glue failure a number of years ago where we had it in the back shop and ran overnight with the vacuum press, and it was February, so the back shop, not being heated at night, came in the next morning and pulled everything apart. We pulled the veneers apart. But yeah, so total failure. We called up Daryl and said, what happened? And he told us exactly. Yeah. So yeah, in urea formaldehyde, automatically put an electric blanket on it. But he told me yesterday, I talked to him, and he said, yeah, like Unibond, you heat it up enough, like I think he said like 150 degrees or something, and that's going to cure like in 3 minutes.
Well, speaking of curing in 3 minutes, and back to epoxy, my brother was doing a butcher block countertop, and it had some voids. And so I pulled out my West Systems and my Trans Tint, and we, mixed up. We did one countertop one day, totally fine, perfectly worked great. And then like a week later, we go to do some more void filling. And my brother goes, "How many drops did we put in last time?" I said, "I don't know, 3, 4, 5." And he put 5 drops in.
Yeah.
And that was the difference. And the epoxy said, "Nuh-uh." And my brother's sitting there going, "It's getting really hot." And then I'm like, "Yeah, it heats up, whatever, I'm doing the thing." And he goes, "It's smoking."
Yeah. Is it supposed to catch on fire?
The styrofoam cup is melting. I've had that. Yeah.
But it's like when you better follow the epoxy directions.
It's no messing
T.
around. Yeah, definitely. I love the heating of the rest of the cup, and after it starts to kick, and like it is heating up, and you can see a little whisper of smoke coming out of it, and go, "Yeah, that's cool."
Rather than mess around with temperatures of glues, if you're looking for longer open time, I think it's really it's the type of glue you're using. It's something I'm a huge proponent of. I'm trying to get Bob on board with this, and he refuses to this point, but liquid hide glue is fantastic.
Don't be ridiculous. Yellow glue is used for everything. Everything.
If this is your first time on Chopped Off Live, they're playing a little game right now.
Bob, you want to tell us
reversal, is that it?
You want to tell us about liquid hide glue?
So it turns out that yellow glue, PVA glue, really has about a 15-minute working time.
Yeah.
And even that I find sometimes to be wishful thinking.
Type on 1.
Yeah. I mean, it goes fast. And, the whole idea that, I can adjust that mortise and tenon after 3 minutes, that ain't going to happen.
Right.
But old brown glue, liquid hide glue, especially old brown glue, the working time you have on that is incredible. I mean, it's so, you have 20, 30 minutes that you can be screwing around with stuff and adjusting things, which is huge. Any kind of tricky glue up or anything like that, it's fantastic. And because the glue itself is actually slippery.
Mm-hmm. It is,
so it lubricates the joint. So if it's too tight, you can put it together easily with the old brown glue. Whereas,
especially if you heat it up a little.
Well, yeah.
Oh man.
Oh, you need to heat it. You have to heat it up. It's not viscous at room temperature. I put it in a glue pot and usually work with it around 130, 140 degrees. But you don't have to be that hot.
Yeah.
You can be, just hot water in the sink, put it in hot water for a little while is fine. But it just gives you so much more open time, and the cleanup, the glue squeeze out, you can use a rag, a toothbrush. You can come back 3 days from now if there's any squeeze out and, soften it with a brush and then just get rid of it. So it's beautiful. The downside of it is that it has a really long working time. So you need to be in clamps for minimum 4 hours and, overnight if you can.
Yeah.
Which is fine for a lot of things. I would never do that with yellow glue. I mean, yellow glue, take it out of clamps in half an hour, you're good. Mm-hmm. But the old brown glue, you need to have that extra clamping time. Yeah.
Speaking of old brown, it always blows my mind that on the total opposite end of the spectrum is hot hide glue, where you have like no time whatsoever.
Exactly.
And it's pretty much the same thing with like one ingredient added.
Yeah.
But I don't want to start any arguments, but I watch a lot of luthiery videos, and luthiers are always putting a heat lamp on the part.
Yeah.
To heat it up, and then put hot hide glue on it.
Exactly.
And they say, "Oh, it gives me more time." Patrick Edwards, I mentioned that to him. He was like, "Nope, doing the opposite."
Really? Mm-hmm. That surprises me.
Yeah, so that's one of those, like, if I ever wind up with way too much time, I'm going to test out.
Yeah.
But because he says that is speeding up the evaporation of the water in the glue,
which
so it's not a cooling,
which is how
it's
it
an
dries.
evaporation.
Part of how it dries. Yeah.
Interesting.
Is the moisture loss.
Yeah. So
that's interesting because Pat is, I mean, when I have a glue question, I call Pat, and I talked to him just last week about old brown glue and hot hide glue. Mm-hmm. So I'll have to ask him about that, because it's my understanding that in, traditional, like in an old, shop from 200 years ago, it was like, we've got a complex glue up. It's the middle of August. Why do we have the fireplace going full blast in the shop?
Yeah.
Because we got to heat it up.
Huh. Well,
but then I wasn't there.
I might be misspeaking.
Now it'd be interesting
you
to find out.
You will set us straight, Bob.
That's something I want to try now too.
Yeah. So, Bob.
Yeah, I'm on.
I walked up here, and you're like, "Hey man, you gotta check this out. And it's true, you are not helping Mike whatsoever while he's teaching.
Of course
you're building something over in your little corner. But
exactly.
You wanted to show me something. I was like, there's your all-time favorite technique.
It was finishing up these two little side tables for my daughter, and one of the drawers, I was putting in the drawers, and one of the drawers was not closing quite straight. Okay. It was just it would come, and it was just a little bit off. And I remember, I was thinking about, something I learned from a piece of furniture that was made by John Shaw, Annapolis cabinet maker, 1790 or so. And this was called Mary's Table, and it's an amazing Pembroke table that I had the good fortune to study at Mesda, and was actually able to, we took the drawer out and looking inside of it and looking in the inside, and in the inside of the back of the drawer pocket on the right side, I saw this little, looked like a wedge that had been glued into the inside of the apron. And going, and then I'm looking at the drawer, and there was a corresponding wear mark on the back corner of the dovetails. And it was just like, and then it was like, it hit me. Yeah, okay, I know exactly what happened. And this was a curved front drawer, and it obviously did not close up right. And so he put with hot hide glue, a rub joint, and this little wedge. So the drawer went in, hit the wedge, and made a left-hand turn and closed perfectly. And and that's what I did just before Ben came. I was playing.
You blue taped yours in, I think.
That was temporary. Well, it was Mike's here, and there's blue tape everywhere.
On the floor, on the benches, everywhere.
It's ridiculous.
Awesome.
I mean, just streaming in the wind. That, and the only thing holding it down is the double stick tape. That's all everywhere else. I mean, you walk anywhere, there's double stick tape.
Double stick tape is the new blue tape.
Yeah, I think what have we gone through, like 3-4 rolls this week?
Yeah.
Jeez.
And it's tough because Bob is always giving me a hard time with the blue tape. So I'm never using exactly the amount I should. I'm either kind of paranoid and I'm using little pieces because I don't want to freak out Bob, or I'm ticked off and I just plaster that thing with tape. So.
Exactly. So yeah. So the wedge that I was trying out, just I taped it on and just to see, and yeah, it works. So tomorrow I'm going to dial it in and make sure that it's good. And then I'll heat up some hide glue and put it in.
You showed me before and after, and you pulled it off, and you pushed it in, and yeah, there really was. It's like the drawer was just a little off. I'm not going to say Bob Van Dyke made an out of square drawer.
I can guarantee you that I made an out of square drawer. I remember that drawer, and I had a hard time gluing that drawer up. I don't know why, but yeah. So,
but yeah, that little wedge just knocked it right into place. It was great.
It was funny, and when you say that, that drawer is probably the only time that I've done a drawer with half blind dovetails in the front and just the dado in the back.
Right.
And I don't think I've ever done that before. And I had a hell of a time squaring both of those drawers where I've never had glue up a drawer. Okay, yeah, it's square.
Oh, wow.
And I've never had an issue. And that one, both of those drawers, I remember when I was like, wow, screwing around with it. And I was like, all right, take the clamps off, screw around with it again. Thank God I was using the old brown glue that I could actually do that rather than the yellow glue that, someone who's sitting at this table swears by forever. He actually drinks it. I've seen him drink it.
This episode is sponsored by Old Brown Glue and Type-On.
Sticky stuff.
Not necessarily in that order.
This episode is sponsored by Gorilla Glue.
Exactly.
I should check who this episode's sponsored by.
Might
need to hold it a few weeks.
Guess what?
Yeah. So, do you have one, or do you need another minute?
Are we doing a bit? Was that a bit?
That was a bit.
Oh yeah. Okay. Favorite technique of all time. That's super cool. I unfortunately have a smooth move, and like the most mortifying smooth move is like when you do something to someone else's furniture part. So
yeah.
Like one of the students were doing this little arts and crafts cabinet, and the little drawer divider, the shoulder dimension was just a little too long, like a hair, like a 32nd. But I know if we cleaned it up, this thing would come together perfectly. So it was worth it. So came over the table saw with a crosscut sled and kind of had to engineer a stop block, a little sliding stop to work around this weird 3-shouldered piece with an off-center tenon, and got it dialed in perfectly, set the blade just below the tenon, and we could like trim the whole thing. So I got it all set up, took 10 or 15 minutes. I was super proud of myself. The students watching me and said, yeah, check this out. And then go just to trim that shoulder. And I forgot to lower the blade below the tenon, and it just like zipped the tenon off. It's like, boom. No. And it was like with such confidence, is like, was that supposed to happen? No. So
it hurts.
Yeah.
Yeah,
so?
I've been there.
And it's just like, all right, I'll be right back. I got some wood over here. We'll make you up a new part. We'll try this again. So,
have you heard about the domino?
Yeah.
And the thing is, it's like you stopped right before the tenon came off, so you kind of looked at it and was just like, no, there's no salvaging this. It's still just like hanging on by a thread. It's like,
a little bit of sawdust and glue jam in there.
It'll be fine.
It'll be fine. Get it glued up.
And you look around real quick. Did anyone see that?
Yeah.
Was it a teaching moment?
It was just like, sorry, man. I'll make it right. Show up 10 minutes later. Here's your new part. It should fit. There you go.
And it kills me though, because you're in a class and you screw up something like that. Not that I've ever done that myself, but I've heard about that happening. The instructor screwing up stuff. And the students always go, oh, no, that's great, because you learn so much just to find out that you screw up stuff too. Mm-hmm. It's just like, oh, yeah, okay, yeah, I was going for that. That's what I was trying to do.
Oh, man. Man, I can't follow that one. But I have a really quick technique of, I've got 1.5 million drawer fronts to to apply. So I'm using full extension drawer slides.
Double-sided tape.
Better.
Yeah.
Can't move double-sided tape. So I'm using full extension drawer slides, and I was going to rabbit the fronts and try and cover up those drawer slides. And then Barry and I were talking, and he was like, "You're really making your life hard with this." I was like, "Yeah, you're right." So decided just make the drawer boxes and just use an applied front. So it was nice because I was able to use less expensive oak. And so I'm just applying 1/4-inch faces to the drawers. But you want the reveals to be perfect still. You want to be able to fiddle with it. And there's no hand planing in that case. There's no, you got to get it on there. So cases all set, drawers are in there, and I was just, if I was working on the bottom drawer, I'd pull the drawer out on top of it and put my 16th-inch shims on the bottom, put the drawer front in, get it placed, tilt it out, use a hot melt glue gun on the edges, and let it dry for like 2 seconds. Because if you go immediately, it's on.
Okay.
And it'll pull wood out, when you take it off. But so just get it, let it dry a second, apply the drawer front, get the side to side perfect, hold it there for a second, pull the whole drawer out, which I can do because the top drawer, the drawer above it has been taken out. Pull the whole drawer out, and then take my little drawer pull jig and drill my holes in the front, and the drawer pulls are what will really hold it on. But the great thing is I've got these all sized, these drawers sized and perfectly placed. I can now take them off still because it's just hot melt glued on. I can take the drawer pulls off, yank the drawers off. I'm going to do a little bead, which I'm doing it to the finished dimensions. So I can do a little bead, fume it, finish them, stick them back on.
Cool.
And then I'll use a couple of screws from the inside to hold it on.
Awesome.
But, yeah.
There is a little bit of hardware that's used in commercial work with applied drawer fronts that we used to use it years ago back at the school back at Harris. And it's basically about a 3/4-inch diameter plastic plug that a screw goes into a little piece of metal embedded in the plug, but that thing, it can move around. Mm-hmm. So you screw the in from the inside of the box, and it holds the front on, and then you can move that thing around, adjust it until it gets it perfect, and then you tighten up from the back, and it's there.
Yeah.
And it's used in commercial work.
Yeah, Mike Farrington uses those a lot. That's one of those. If this was something if I was doing a kitchen
that's basically what it's for. And we used to use it in some of the cabinet making classes, that kitchen cabinet type of class. It has its use, definitely.
One of those things that's so simple in concept, but in practice, it's like, oh, I don't know how I do that.
Yeah.
Well, I've done double-sided tape before, but once it's on, you can't move it around. And if you do move it around, it's not strong enough to pull the drawer back out and be assured it's where it was.
Right.
Yeah.
Whereas, and honestly, I just need to pull the drawer out 2 inches, get some spring clamps on there, and then I'm fine.
Right.
So the hot melt glue gives you just enough wiggle room to get a little bit of side to side, make sure everything's right, and then do your movement. And then when I pull them off, you just kind of sit there and flick the hot melt glue off so that it's not acting as a shim on the finished piece. But then the drawer pulls will be able to reference everything right back in where it was.
Yeah.
So
Very
cool.
Yeah. All right, let's take a break. Grizzly is a family-owned company that has been providing quality woodworking equipment at great prices for close to 40 years. Table saws, bandsaws, joiners, planers, even specialty machines like mortisers, dovetail machines, and edge banders. If you need it, Grizzly probably has it. Grizzly sells direct to consumers to provide the best value for your equipment purchase and offers a complete line of quality equipment with selections to fit the needs of any woodworker. From benchtop machines at low prices to help newer woodworkers equip their shop and get started, to powerful 3-phase sliding saws, drum sanders, and CNC routers for your production shop. They have over 750,000 square feet of inventory for quick delivery, and they have multiple financing options available. Grizzly believes in supporting their customers with outstanding customer service before and after the sale through their US-based customer support, giving you confidence in the tools you buy and empowering you to invent, build, and expand. Visit them now at grizzly.com. Join renowned turner and beloved teacher Beth Ireland for a webinar September 16th at 7 p.m. as she demystifies offset turning. She'll explain how you can make turned parts like legs or boxes with an elliptical cross-section or even a triangular one. This is a webinar you don't want to miss. Sign up at finewoodworking.com/webinars. All right, question number 3 is from Tom. Let's try this again. I'm building a dining table that has a 4-foot by 7-foot top that is 1 1/8 of an inch thick. It's composed of 6 boards, with the 2 outer pieces being live edge. I have routed a groove for a spline, mostly to help keep alignment. I've made the spring joint with a number 8 Stanley hand plane. 7 foot is bigger than my 6-inch joiner can handle, and the number 8 is the only plane that would cut both pieces at the same time. When the top is dry fit loosely, there is a gap in the middle of each joint of a little more than 1/32 of an inch, as measured by a feeler gauge, with the ends nice and tight. I've just read about every spring joint. I've read just about every spring joint article in Fine Woodworking, mostly by Gary Rogowski and Bob Van Dyke, that I could find after multiple searches. I'm having trouble getting the center clamp to close all of the gaps when dry fitting. I have checked the dados and grooves for enough clearance. I can make the joints close nicely when clamped 1 or 2 at a time. I really doubt that I can do 5 joints in one glue up, and I will probably do it in 3 or 2. I'm afraid that when I do multiple glue ups, the last joint will not close no matter how much force I put on it. And I do not want to crush the live edge. There's a lot going on here.
Yeah. So
6 boards, 1 1/8 thick.
Yeah.
Trying to bend them.
You want to start or you want me to start?
Go ahead.
So the way I would go about doing that, couple things. I would not try, and it would take the live edge part variable as the last thing, because that makes it tricky. But just doing a 6 board glue up, I would do those in 2 board sections. So I would do 2 and then 2, and then I would take the 2 boards and I would add another board to it. So I would I would spring that. And then the last one being, now you've got 3 boards wide, mm-hmm. and let's say call it 6 boards. So you got 2 3-board ones, and then you're going to put the whole thing together. And so you're going to have, 2 feet wide and 2 feet wide. That's going to be kind of tricky. So then I might go, all right, rather than doing that, I might build up 2 and then a 3rd one and then a 4th one. And then my last one, I would do a spring on the outside board only.
Okay.
And straight on the other one. So let's say now
let's just dial it back a minute. You would just do 2, add a board.
Yeah.
Add a board.
Yeah.
Add a board. You wouldn't do separate assemblies and then try and get them together.
I would consider that, but as I was thinking about it, going, all right, well now you've got a 2 foot wide glue up and another 2 foot wide glue up, and you're going to try and spring those.
Yeah.
And that's a bit much.
Yeah.
So the other thing is there's too much. He's got too much. 32nd is too much anyway.
Too much for any spring joint.
Yeah.
Okay.
But rather than going that route, if you're going 2, add another one. Now you got 3. Now add another one. And so now your last one, if you are springing the outer board but the rest of it is straight.
Yeah.
So now you're going to spring that. And so you can move that outer board to close up. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think that's how I would go about that.
Makes sense. I just didn't see it coming. That's why.
Yeah. Because trying to do it, and I would definitely, where he says worrying about trying to do the whole thing at once. Yeah. Gluing up 6 boards, 6-board glue up all at once. I can't see anything good happening there. That would really be easy to screw up. The other thing though was the 32nd of an inch is too much. Whenever I demonstrate a spring joint,
Even on that long of a board.
well, on a 7 foot, there, even though it strikes me as a little bit much.
Okay.
But whenever I do a demonstrate a spring joint to students, and the first thing that they always do is because I always test them vertically, and the first thing that they always do, I see them all looking down to look and see if they can see the gap, and it's not that big. I mean, I usually put a 3 or 4 thousandths feeler gauge through it to show that's what it is, which is basically the thickness of a piece of paper, so, I think that's it. The other thing I find is, and using a number 8, I do a spring joint with a number 4.
Well, he wanted a wide blade so he could do 2 boards at a time, right?
I understand that, but a number 8 is a really long plane, which means that trying to make a hollow with a really long plane is close to impossible. Now I see people that they're skewing it so much that it's really a number 4 plane with outriggers on either side, being able to cut both of them at once is nice, but it's not critical. It's a nice thing, but it's not critical. So,
how did you do your hay rake table? Because that's too big for your shop in my head.
No, I tend to do like a tabletop glue-ups. I do it all at once.
Yeah.
I have calls to keep it flat. I work really, really hard to try to get the boards aligned because I tend to pull out a card scraper hand plane. And your first glue-up that you hand plane teaches you that the next glue up is going to be really, really flat.
Yeah, so, exactly.
The spring joints, if I'm doing a case side from 2 boards, I'll look for a spring joint. And like Bob was saying, it's not a lot. What I'll do is I'll clamp one of the boards in a vise and I'll stick the other board on edge on top of it, balance on top, and I'll push the ends of the board. And if it pivots from the center, it means it's high in the center. So I'll plane it, and even if it doesn't look like there's a spring joint, if I push the corners and it pivots off of one end or the other, I know, okay, I'm getting pressure there.
Yeah.
But on a 7-foot tabletop, I'm just looking for a decent glue joint. A spring joint is like, oh yeah, that's the one thing I really want, and it sort of gets to the clamping the 2 boards together and planing them at once. The idea is that it's a complementary angle, or supplemental.
Supplementary.
Thank you. So you're planing both boards at the same angle, so when you book match them up together, even if it's off 90, it's going to be flat. And that's good in concept, but what I find, if you're trying to do that and you're trying to create a spring joint, you're often planing it, taking it out, putting it on there, and then having to reclamp it, and you never get it exactly even again. So you're always having to dress it until it's flat. Yeah. And I've given up on that, and I will plane each board at one at a time. And it sounds like a super difficult thing. Bob has a really good technique he uses with a sort of a funkily sharpened camber-ish blade. I use a straight blade, and I'll joint both boards. I'll clamp one up, put one on, and I'll check to see if the overall spring-ish joint is good. If that's good, then I put a ruler up on the face of the boards to see if they're parallel or not. Is it flat? And if it's not, I just use my hand plane. I intentionally tilt the blade. It's what the little lateral adjuster is for. You just sort of kick it there to bevel it a really slight amount. And the reason why I bevel the blade is it allows you to keep the hand plane flat on the board and take a controlled amount of tapered cut on there. And the idea is that you don't want to hit it in one shot. You want to you take one pass, you put it on, okay, I have that, so that let me do one more. And because it's like a tilted blade, every pass will give you incrementally more and more bevel on there. And I find I can really control that to get it dead flat.
I just can't ever remember which way to push the adjuster to hang the blade. I always go the wrong way every single time.
My iron is sharpened. It's not cambered, but the corner's pulled back a little bit, so I can use the left side of my plane or the right side of my plane, and I can take, like from the center of the plane of the iron to the edge and be cutting something to nothing, and depending on which side of the board is high, I can control it that way. It's basically what Mike just described, but I'm always keeping my iron exactly centered, and I'm moving the plane left or right,
and only taking a partial pass.
Well, it's taking almost a full width shaving, but if you look at the shaving, if you mic the shaving, one side is it's a hard edge, a hair thicker, and then the other side feathers out to nothing. And it's taking less per cut. I find that moving the lateral adjust one way or the other, my tendency would be I would end up moving it too much. I think
the one thing is, you can control it the same way that you can level out a blade so that you're taking 1,000 shaving even all the way across. Right. You do have that. What I do find the danger is after you're done doing this and you put your hand plane back up on the shelf and then you take a swipe across the board, a week later, and you're just like digging into one side of the plate.
That's not what I was going for.
Oh yeah, I should have maybe leveled that thing out again.
So.
All right, this last question is from friend of the show, Dean.
Hey, Dean.
When flattening or edge straightening a board on a jointer, is it better to take a moderate 46 thousandths of an inch to 93 thousandths of an inch?
That's my Dean.
Or perhaps a greater cut? And he should have given us metric equivalents.
Exactly.
So that is
sorry, that's the only way I can think.
That's 3/64ths or to 3/32 for the non-machinists. Or are you better off doing multiple passes of 10 thousandths to 15 thousandths? This critical element has not been addressed in videos, articles, or blogs that I have discovered.
We're talking face joining or edge joining?
Well, you're saying both.
Flattening or edge joining. This guy is just driving around in the parking lot.
He's heading out into the street, though. Okay.
I tend to take a heavier cut edge joining than I do face joining.
Wait, you can move? Like
It
there's...
goes up and down.
Oh, yeah.
Is really?
No, you can adjust that. Yeah, it turns out.
All right.
Yeah,
I'll take your
and,
word for
and
it.
you can sharpen them too.
No.
Yeah. It's amazing how many people don't realize that joiner knives and table saw blades can actually be sharpened.
Mine have been nicked, and I just thought that's the way they are.
Oh, it's art.
That's why there's a card scraper right there.
Yeah. The thing is, I've never measured it. I look at it, it's a feel thing.
Yeah.
I mean, what Mike said about doing an edge, I typically take a heavier cut on an edge than on the face because you're cutting less wood. I mean, if you're doing a piece of wood that's 1 inch thick, but you're just doing the edge as opposed to facing an 8-inch wide piece.
Right.
But a lot of it depends on how sharp the knives are. And I find that if you take too heavy of a cut, it's too much work. But it's harder to control. But if you take too light of a cut, the joiner has to be adjusted really well.
Right.
Yes. So
Because if you're out a little bit, now you're making tapers and all this other stuff.
So I have deepened my cuts lately
Yeah.
because I find that if I go really, really thin, it's just I'm there forever and I'm making a wedge and it's just, and if I lower that table, I can do one pass and it's pretty much there, so
You might, if you're getting that wedge, then lots of times if you just lower your outfeed table a hair in relation to the top dead center of the arc of the knives, that will usually take care of that. It might give you a little bit of snipe, so you have to.
So you're not
have
saying
to balance
I should
that.
probably set my joiner up again after moving it in a pickup truck?
Oh no, pickup trucks are a perfect way of adjusting the joiner. That's how I always do it.
I really need to adjust my joiner.
But just put a straight edge on the outfeed and rotate the knife, in reverse, and see if it hits the straight edge. It should ideally move that straight edge about 1/4 of an inch.
Yeah.
Right.
And, the theoretical, it's exactly top dead center of the arc, means that it's not going to
not.
move that straight edge at all.
Yeah.
Which means that you're gonna end up cutting tapers unless everything is perfect.
Right.
So if your joint is properly set up, you should be able to take whisper thin passes and you're fine. If your joiner's like mine, you that's just evidence
Go
that
a
you
little
probably
heavier.
Go a little heavier and or dial it in.
But if you're facing something and you're like, wow, that's way too much, then you go, yeah, that was way too much.
Yeah.
Yes.
Dial it back a little.
How often do you set your joiner up? You don't count because you're running a business. So
How often what?
how often do you set your joiner up?
Set my joiner? The infeed?
Well, like to
Adjust the infeed,
like
the
actually like
thickness of
shim
cut?
it and check, that your tables are
Or
coplanar.
coplanar?
And
Haven't done it yet. And I bought that in 1984.
Okay.
So I think I checked it once. Yeah, it's good.
it's been working. You seem to do okay. So
I really want to get a segmented cutter head in there.
do you really?
That
want
is
to.
a game changer. Totally.
But it's never a finish.
But I was the same way. Okay, I got, for the planer segmented cutter head, bird cutter head, 12 years ago maybe, easily. And I resisted the joiner because I was like, yeah, it's not a big deal.
Those joiner knives were super dull. I just changed those a month ago. Like 5,000 board feet ago.
Yeah, it was amazing how quickly they got dull. and I would resist it because I was like, yeah, it's just the joiner. I mean, who cares? It's, and I had the opportunity when I was teaching in Virginia a number of years ago, and they had that 16-inch Northfield joiner with the segmented cutter head. Yeah. And I was like, oh, this is beautiful. I mean, the surface that I got was great. And then what really did it for me was working with plywood and MDF. When I did that tenon slider article, and I don't think I did it in the article, but I did it afterwards. It wasn't quite square. And it was like, all right, well, if I face the Baltic birch surface, the vertical, if I face joint that on the carbide knived joiner, and then I take that and put that against the fence and I edge joint the two runners, it'll come out perfectly square.
I can feel the YouTube comments coming.
And it was just unbelievable how well it worked. And it's not something that I would ever do with straight knives.
No. Yeah.
But it was just like, oh, this is wonderful. I mean, it was just like a total game changer. I was like, okay, it almost made it into a new tool. Something that now I can work with plywood, MDF, and it's not an issue.
Yeah.
Which always was a huge issue.
Right.
Yeah.
So the straight knife guys, sorry. Suck it up.
Wow. Good to know.
Yeah.
Suck it up and spend another $1,000 on a cutter head, you jerk.
But it really, I can't, I was always screwing around. The reason I finally broke down and got them for the joiners was because the knives were never a consistent height.
Yeah.
And it was always one knife was doing all the work.
Yes.
And I just couldn't deal with it anymore. And I finally said, okay. And I bit the bullet. And I wouldn't even consider having straight knives on either the planer or the joiner anymore. I wouldn't, it would be like, to me, it'd be like, okay, I'm throwing good money after bad.
So do I have permission to run MDF through the new planer in the fine woodworking shop?
Nope.
Okay.
I did it just the other day.
5/8 inch MDF.
I did it just the other day. It was a cutting board that I used for cutting stringing, and it was getting all ragged. And I was like, all right. And now that was 3/4 inch MDF, and now it's around 5/8, and it's nice and clean, both faces, no problem. Yep.
So, do you have anything to add to this?
I do not.
You cannot follow that one up.
No.
All right. Well, that does it for this episode of Shop Talk Live. Don't forget that September 16th is Beth Ireland's webinar on offset turning, and she's incredible. You're going to want to be there. Special thanks to Bob for joining us on this episode, and a super special thanks to Grizzly for sponsoring this episode. If you have any questions you'd like us to answer on the show, send them in to shoptalk@taunton.com. If you're on YouTube, give us that thumbs up button. It really does help. And don't forget, iTunes reviews are like gold to podcasters. Thanks for listening, and we'll be back in 2 weeks with another episode.
It's a nice day when even the Ocean State job lot red awning looks luminous and beautiful.
What?
Scenic.
The red awning for Ocean State.
There you go.
It's like it's this beautiful glowing red.
Ocean State and
Pepoise.
yeah.
See, I pretend,
A lot of red.
Yeah.
I see the seagulls back here, lots of times. So I pretend that this is like, the ocean out there. That's a big lake,
Wow.
That's rough.
and yeah. I mean, what else are you going to pretend a vacant,
One day we're going to come out here and it's going to be
derelict
like
parking lot is?
a beach chair and an umbrella, and Bob doesn't have a shirt on.
Hanging out.